Victoria Blackwood's tears splashed onto the hospital floor as she clutched the small, worn teddy bear, the same one she'd ruthlessly sued a children's charity for using in their logo last month. The fearsome CEO who destroyed careers without blinking now stood shattered, her designer heels unsteady beneath her as the doctor delivered news that would change everything. Her heart was failing, and without a transplant, she had 6 months to live. Her long silky platinum blonde hair, usually styled to perfection, fell limply around her ashen face, and for once, the sharp intelligence in her ice-blue eyes was clouded with something unfamiliar, fear. The Hermes scarf at her throat couldn't hide the rapid pulse that betrayed her panic, nor could her Chanel perfume mask the cold sweat of mortality. "Ms. Blackwood, given your condition and the waiting list, I must be honest, your chances aren't good," the doctor said, his voice gentle but firm. "Your blood type is rare, and with your age and other factors." He trailed off as Victoria's perfectly manicured hand rose to silence him. Everything she'd built, her empire, her reputation, her carefully constructed walls, suddenly meant nothing. The woman who owned half of Manhattan couldn't buy herself more time. The painful secret she'd hidden for years, that her own mother had died of the same heart condition at 40, now seemed like a cruel prophecy fulfilled. Victoria had spent decades outrunning her genetics with dawn workouts, strict diets, and the best medical care money could buy, only to end up here, facing the same fate she'd feared since childhood. Meanwhile, across town, single father Jack Reynolds was about to make a decision that would intertwine their lives in ways neither could imagine. His apartment was small but filled with evidence of a life richly lived, architectural sketches tacked to walls, Emma's artwork proudly displayed on the refrigerator, and bookshelves overflowing with everything from classic novels to comic books they read together on Sunday mornings. Jack stared at his daughter's sleeping form in the hospital bed, his strong hands, calloused from the construction work he'd taken on after losing his architectural firm in the recession, gently brushing her hair from her forehead. His once promising career had been sacrificed without hesitation when Emma was diagnosed. At 38, the laugh lines around his green eyes had deepened with worry, though his quick wit remained intact, his armor against a world that had dealt him too many blows. The tattoo on his forearm, coordinates of the place where he'd met Emma's mother, who died in childbirth, peeked out from beneath his rolled-up sleeve as he adjusted Emma's blanket. Emma was finally in remission, but the medical bills had left him drowning. Tomorrow, he faced eviction from their apartment, the same building Victoria's company had recently purchased with plans to convert to luxury condos. He had nothing left to lose when he marched into Blackwood Tower the next morning, determined to confront the woman everyone in New York feared. If you're enjoying this emotional journey, hit that like button and let me know in the comments if you've ever stood up to someone powerful. The security guards moved to block Jack, but something in his eyes, a father's desperate determination, made them hesitate just long enough for Victoria to notice the commotion from across the lobby. Their eyes met, and for a reason she couldn't explain, she waved the guards away. Perhaps it was the news still echoing in her mind, or perhaps it was something in his face that seemed so different from the parade of yes-men who surrounded her daily. She noticed, despite his worn jeans and simple button-down shirt, that he carried himself with an innate dignity that her wealthy associates often lacked. His shoulders were broad, his stance confident despite being clearly out of place among the marble and glass of her corporate cathedral. "You have 30 seconds, she said coldly, stepping into her private elevator and gesturing for him to follow. Jack hadn't expected to get this far. As the doors closed, he found himself standing inches from the most feared woman in New York, close enough to see that beneath her perfect makeup, her face was pale and drawn. Close enough to notice that the hand clutching her designer bag was trembling slightly. The scent of her expensive perfume, something subtle and elegant, filled the small space. He also noticed the slight shadows beneath her eyes that even expert concealer couldn't completely hide, and the way she leaned almost imperceptibly against the elevator wall for support. "My daughter just beat cancer," he said simply. "And now your company is throwing us out of our home." His voice had a warm timbre that contrasted with the steel in his words. The small scar on his chin, from a childhood accident, twitched slightly as he clenched his jaw, fighting to maintain composure. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Business is business, mister. She straightened her already perfect posture, a habit from years of boardroom battles. Her French manicure tapped impatiently against her leather portfolio, a nervous tic she thought she'd eliminated years ago. Reynolds. Jack Reynolds. And no, Ms. Blackwood, sometimes business is people. Real people with real lives. His voice didn't waver, even as he stood before the woman who could destroy what remained of his life with a single phone call. A hint of a smile played at the corner of his mouth, not submissive, but challenging. The dimple that appeared briefly on his left cheek softened his otherwise stern expression. What happened next stunned everyone in Victoria's inner circle. Instead of having Jack removed, she invited him to her office, a minimalist sanctuary of glass and steel that reflected her precise, controlled aesthetic, and actually listened, as he spoke about his daughter, about the community in their building, about the elderly couple on the third floor with nowhere else to go. Mrs. Chen who made dumplings for everyone during Chinese New Year. Mr. Guzman who fixed bicycles for neighborhood kids in the courtyard. When he mentioned his former career as an architect, something flickered in her eyes, recognition, perhaps, of the talent wasted. And when he finished, Victoria did something even more shocking, she offered him a job. Can you believe what's happening? Drop a comment with your prediction for what Victoria is really planning, ***. But Victoria's motives weren't as simple as they seemed. As Jack began working as her community outreach director, rumors spread through the company. Her assistant, Marcus, who'd survived 5 years in her employ through a combination of efficiency and emotional detachment, couldn't believe the change in her. The woman who once threw a stapler at an employee for bringing her the wrong coffee now sometimes arrived with pastries for morning meetings. Her executive team whispered behind closed doors. Was this a PR stunt? Had the Ice Queen finally lost her edge? What no one knew was that Victoria had recognized Jack's rare blood type on the visitor badge he'd been issued, the same type she desperately needed. Was she keeping him close for entirely selfish reasons? The truth was more complicated. For the first time in decades, Victoria found herself looking forward to someone's company. Jack challenged her, made her laugh, refused to be intimidated. During late-night project reviews, she caught herself watching the way his hands moved as he sketched redesigns for affordable housing units, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled genuinely. The small scar on his right hand, from a construction accident, reminded her that he was a man who worked with both his mind and his hands, something rare in her world of theoretical power. You know, he teased one evening as they shared takeout in her office, chopsticks poised over containers of Kung Pao chicken, most people think you're made of ice, but I'm starting to suspect you're actually human. Victoria had arched a perfect eyebrow. Careful, Reynolds. That sounds dangerously close to insubordination. Their eyes held for a beat too long before both looked away, Victoria tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in a rare gesture of self-consciousness. He saw through her armor to the wounded woman beneath. And despite her best efforts to maintain distance, she found herself drawn to his daughter Emma, whose resilience reminded Victoria of herself before life had hardened her heart. Emma, with her gap-toothed smile and precocious questions, had a way of making Victoria forget her carefully constructed persona. The child's collection of mismatched barrettes and boundless enthusiasm for life were antidotes to Victoria's regimented existence. Why do you always wear such high shoes if they hurt your feet? Emma had asked during a visit to the office, noticing Victoria's subtle wince. No one had dared question Victoria's choices in years. And why is your office so white? Wouldn't colors make you happier? That weekend, Victoria found herself in an art supply store, something she hadn't done since college, before spreadsheets replaced sketches. Then came the night that changed everything. Victoria collapsed during a charity gala, the same charity she'd once sued. The room spun around her, crystal chandeliers blurring into streaks of light as her knees buckled. The champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor in perfect synchronicity with her facade. Jack was the one who found her, who rode with her in the ambulance, who stayed while doctors worked frantically to stabilize her. His hand had gripped hers tightly in the ambulance, his voice steady in her ear. "Stay with me, Victoria. You're too stubborn to check out now. Emma still hasn't convinced you to try her rainbow pancakes." And it was Jack who overheard the truth about her condition when the doctors thought no one was listening, his face going pale as he leaned against the wall outside her room, the coffee in his hand growing cold. This story is getting intense. Hit subscribe if you want more emotional stories like this one, ***. You've been using me, Jack confronted her the next morning in her hospital room, his voice tight with betrayal. The morning light cast harsh shadows across his face, highlighting the tension in his jaw and the hurt in his eyes. The coffee he'd brought, her favorite precise order from the local shop that made her corporate caterer seem amateur, sat untouched on the side table. "All this time, you've known we're a match. You hired me, got close to Emma, all because you need my blood type." Victoria's face crumpled in a way no business rival had ever witnessed. Without her armor of designer clothes and perfect makeup, in just a hospital gown with her hair pulled back, she looked vulnerable in a way that momentarily disarmed him. The small birthmark near her collarbone, usually hidden by high necklines, was visible now, a humanizing detail on the woman previously thought untouchable. "At first, yes," she whispered, her fingers plucking nervously at the thin blanket. "But Jack, somewhere along the way, it became real. You and Emma became real to me. You made me remember the person I was before." She stopped herself, the monitor beside her bed betraying her increased heart rate. "Before what?" Jack pressed, taking a step closer despite himself. The leather bracelet Emma had made him, woven with beads spelling, "Best Dad," caught the light as he moved. "Before I decided that being feared was safer than being hurt," she admitted, meeting his eyes with raw honesty. "My father abandoned us when I was 12. My mother worked herself to death trying to provide for me. I swore I'd never be vulnerable again." Her hand unconsciously moved to the teddy bear beside her bed, the one connection to her past she'd never been able to sever. "How can I believe anything you say?" Jack demanded, backing toward the door, though something in his eyes suggested he wanted to be convinced. The family photo in his wallet, Emma sitting on his shoulders at Coney Island, both laughing, seemed to burn against his leg, a reminder of what was at stake. The Victoria Blackwood I've heard about for years would say anything to get what she wants. Because the Victoria Blackwood everyone fears doesn't exist anymore, she said, tears streaming down her face. She started dying long before her heart began to fail. Ask yourself this, would that Victoria have cried in front of anyone? Would she have let anyone see her like this? Her voice broke on the last word. The sketchbook hidden in her nightstand at home, filled with drawings she'd started doing again after meeting Emma, was evidence of the change even she hadn't fully acknowledged. Jack walked out, leaving Victoria alone with the realization that she might have found what she'd been searching for her entire life, only to lose it because of who she had been. The woman who had everything now stood to lose the only thing that mattered. That night, she pulled out old photographs, her mother's smile, so like her own, herself at graduation, before ambition had consumed everything else, the teddy bear she still kept, now sitting on her hospital nightstand. The small music box that had been her mother's only luxury played softly as Victoria made the hardest decision of her life. If you're on the edge of your seat, share this with someone who appreciates stories about redemption and second chances. 2 weeks passed. Victoria made a decision that shocked the business world. She transferred ownership of her company to a foundation dedicated to affordable housing and medical care for children. The press called it a publicity stunt. Her board called it insanity. Her CFO, who'd worked with her for 15 years, actually broke down in tears during the announcement, certain she'd lost her mind. The Mont Blanc pen she used to sign the papers, a gift from her first major acquisition, felt heavier than ever as she relinquished control of the empire that had defined her. No one knew she was preparing for the end. On a rainy Tuesday, as Victoria sat alone in her penthouse watching the city lights blur through her tears, her doorman called up. Jack was in the lobby with Emma. Victoria's heart, her failing, broken heart, seemed to stop. She caught her reflection in the window, thinner now, her designer clothes hanging loosely, but her eyes more alive than they'd been in years. The half-finished painting on an easel in the corner, her first in decades, showed a sunrise over the city, colors she'd forgotten existed. "We brought you something," Emma said when they entered, holding out a small, handmade card, her bright eyes, so like her father's, watching Victoria hopefully. The child's mismatched socks and light-up sneakers brought unexpected color to the monochromatic penthouse. Inside was a child's drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands. "That's you, me, and Daddy. I gave you extra long hair because it's so pretty. And look, we're at the park with ice cream." Victoria looked at Jack, questions in her eyes. He stood awkwardly in her living room, hands in his pockets, his hair damp from the rain. The leather jacket he wore, worn at the elbows from years of use, contrasted with the pristine surroundings. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken words. "Emma knows everything," he said quietly. "About your heart. About our match. She's the one who insisted we come." A small smile tugged at his lips. "She can be very persuasive. Gets that from her mother." The wedding ring he still wore on a chain around his neck, visible now as he shifted, caught the light. "Daddy says you're scared," Emma stated with a child's directness, reaching for Victoria's hand without hesitation. The friendship bracelet on her small wrist, matching the one she'd given Victoria weeks ago, which now lay in Victoria's jewelry box beside diamonds worth fortunes, slid down her arm. "I was scared too, when I was sick. But being scared is better when you're not alone." Victoria knelt to Emma's level, something the business titan had never done for anyone, her silk pajamas pooling on the floor. The reading glasses she now needed but hated to wear in public hung from a chain around her neck. "Your daddy has every reason to hate me." "I don't hate you," Jack said, his voice soft as he moved closer. The faint scent of his aftershave, something woodsy and unpretentious, mingled with the rainy smell clinging to his clothes. "I'm angry and confused, but I miss the woman I was getting to know. The real Victoria." His hand reached out, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "The one who laughs at my terrible jokes. The one who secretly feeds pigeons in the park when she thinks no one's watching. The one who knew every employee's name at the site visit last month. The real Victoria is dying," she whispered, leaning slightly into his touch. The tremor in her hands, a new symptom she'd been hiding, was visible now as she reached for Emma's drawing. Jack took her hand, his touch warm against her cold fingers. The contrast between his work-roughened palm and her manicured hand somehow felt right. "Not if I have anything to say about it." The determination in his voice was the same she'd heard that first day in her office, unwavering, uncompromising. The small notebook in his back pocket, filled with research on experimental heart procedures he'd been studying since learning of her condition, pressed against him like a promise. The transplant testing began the next day. Jack was indeed a match, a perfect match, the doctors said with amazement. But as the surgery date approached, Victoria made a stunning announcement: she was removing herself from the transplant list. She'd made the decision after visiting the pediatric ward and meeting a young girl with the same rare blood type. The child's collection of origami cranes, one folded each day of her hospital stay, had moved Victoria in ways quarterly reports never had. "There's a 12-year-old girl in Queens who needs it more," she told a shocked Jack as they walked through Central Park, her steps slower now, her breath sometimes catching. The bench where they stopped, where she'd once closed a multi-million-dollar deal over the phone, now served a different purpose as she rested. "My lawyers have arranged everything. The foundation will cover all costs for her and her family." The journal in her purse contained pages of notes about the girl's family, their struggles, their dreams, details Victoria would have considered irrelevant months ago. That's not how this works, Jack argued, stopping to face her, his hands gripping her shoulders gently. The worry lines between his brows deepened as he searched her face. The coffee shop loyalty card falling from his pocket, stamped each morning when he bought her favorite latte, scattered to the ground unnoticed. You can't just give away your place. Emma needs you. He stopped himself, the words he wasn't ready to say hanging in the autumn air between them. Victoria smiled sadly, reaching up to touch his face. The diamond tennis bracelet she once wore daily was absent, replaced by Emma's handmade creation of beads and string. For once in my life, I can do something that isn't about me. Please understand. In that moment, with the autumn leaves falling around them and the city noise fading away, she looked more at peace than he'd ever seen her. The sketchbook in her tote bag contained drawings of a future she now accepted she might never see, designs for playgrounds, community gardens, spaces where people could connect. But Jack didn't understand, not until he did something truly unthinkable. Without telling Victoria, he went directly to the hospital board with a proposal so unprecedented they initially refused to consider it.